Hello, good morning, and this is our regular CEO interview brought to you on Finance, Core Finance, and I'm Charlie Gibson. Now, I think it'd be fair to say that our next guest, our next company, is no stranger to controversy. And the company, I will tell you, is Symphony Environmental, and joining me now is its Chief Executive, Michael Laurier. Michael, good morning. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Just to give a little introduction, your share price, if you went back to the beginning of 2017, was about 5p a share. Since been up to about 25p a share, a little bit of bad media, and now you're down to about 10p, 15p, give or take, a share. I think that would be fair to say. We could all agree on that. Just tell me a little bit about what Symphony Environmental does.
Symphony Environmental is a technology company that has spent the last 20 years making a technology that you mix into ordinary plastic to make that plastic fully biodegradable. And so our core investment is all about protecting the planet from plastic pollution. And it's taken 15 and a bit years to be able to refine the technology, refine the marketing messages, prove that it's recyclable, prove that it's biodegradable, prove that it doesn't upset the recycling system. And then, as we move forward, the world now, for the very, very first time, recognizes there's a problem. We've been saying there's a problem with plastic pollution for the last 20 years. Now is the time, and yes, we're in the spotlight. People, when we launched this technology, said, you cannot make plastic degrade. You can't do it. It's impossible. And larger corporations would say to us, well, a little company like that can make plastic degrade. We would have done it before them. But we did it. Fast forward 2 or 3 years, you then get to, oh, it really works, but you've got to destabilize the landfills. Our position was, of course you're not going to destabilize the landfills. It's not invented for landfills. It's invented to protect the open environment from plastic pollution. And then we move forward, fast forward, just a little bit of history. You're going to destroy the recycling streams. It's going to pollute the recycling. We then do 5 years of study. We recycle thousands of tons of plastic. We prove it doesn't affect the recycling. And now, fast forward again, for the last few weeks, oh, your technology is going to produce microplastics, which is what the media is saying, which is the entire opposite to the communications that we are making and that we've proven, not by one scientist, but by scientists all over the world, by peer-reviewed papers. But our opponents, or people that want to confuse people, are saying, you're producing microplastics, bad idea. And that's today's argument. And that's why from actually a 34p share price, as we were a couple of months ago, to a 25p share price to around about 14p now, because people were confused. But that's our core technology. With that, we export to nearly 100 countries around the world.
So you have this technology which allows plastic to biodegrade. Is that correct so far?
Yes, oxidation. As you said, oxy is the short word for oxidation.
So oxy-biodegrade, and any plastic that's biodegrading, I think we've all seen the pictures, haven't we, on television screens of turtles and plastic bags in the oceans. So any biodegradation on that perspective would be a good thing.
Oxidation is a very good thing if you can control it. And a good example of how the oxidation process works and the biodegradation process is on our website. There's a very short video. Anyone going onto the www.d2w website can get about a 2-minute video, which is accelerated degradation, showing how the plastic material itself converts from a critical mass to biodegradable materials. And at the very end of that short accelerated video, you see the microbes actually eating, consuming. You're seeing a huge amount of colonization of those microbes on what is no longer the plastic, but the biodegradable materials. So we've actually converted that plastic material into a food material for everyday microbes to consume and get cellable structure and energy. That's our technology. That's what we're doing to plastic.
So this bad media you've had in the last few months, what is that all about then? What's the issue? What's the argument they're putting forward?
Well, I think the issue is caused by confusion. There is a group of competing companies that are trying desperately hard to sell crop-based materials, commonly found in a lot of supermarkets. You might find products called compostable products. They smell a bit, they're very, very flimsy in their nature, and you're supposed to put your compost in it. That is what essentially this technology competes with. Really, really expensive, up to 3 times more than what we sell. And the people that are invested into those companies, seriously large global companies, it's not in their interest to see oxo-biodegradable succeed, because we actually deal with the plastic pollution issue, the materials that escape in the environment. Their technology is being 3 times more, or up to 3 times more. You've got to pick it up, you've got to put it in a compost. 2 different businesses, but we're considered as a threat. And so they shout louder than we can shout because they have more money to shout. We don't. We shout as best we can. We communicate with governments all over the world. And it's a matter about who shouts the loudest. But if you go to the facts, if people really look at the facts and you rely on the media like we are today, giving us the ability to communicate the facts, on hard facts, our material is solid, it's got the evidence, it's proven to degrade, it's proven to biodegrade, doesn't interrupt the plastic industry, it deals with the last final concern. That final concern is within the British government mandate, it's in the EU mandate, stop plastic pollution. That's mandated in the Packaging Waste Directive, it's mandated in the UK strategy on plastic, it's mandated all over the world. Treat your plastic, recycle it, reuse, make it biodegradable. We tick all those boxes because we can reduce, we can reuse, we can recycle, but we pre-treat it so that in the event it ends up in the environment, it degrades and biodegrades. But our detractors don't like that because they lose on price and they lose on the litter argument. So you have to cause communications that causes doubt. And that's what's going on. It's surfaced in the UK, we've had it in Brazil, we've had it in all sorts of countries. It's a natural thing to happen, and we have to keep on course to communicate those messages. We have the data, we have the evidence. There's not one single piece of evidence out there that says our technology doesn't work.
Now, Michael, I think I'm right in saying that we have a video here now of some of the issues that this bad media, if you like, as far as Symphony Environmental is concerned, and it raises some of the issues that you're talking about. So let's just have a look at that video now.
There is a huge problem caused all around the world by plastic waste in the environment, where it lies or floats around for decades and breaks up into microplastics.
Well, wouldn't it be great if that plastic, once it's actually used its life, disappeared like a twig or a leaf? Well, the great thing is it can. You know, we feel it's important to reuse and recycle plastics if possible, but if it does find its way into the environment, then we need to have an insurance policy so that it will disappear in a timely manner, and that's simply the technology that we have.
The problem with non-degradable plastics is that when they fragment in the environment, they're physically smaller, but they're still very much a polymer, so they're not accessible to microorganisms. Now, these materials are known to accumulate toxins and environmental pollutants that can then concentrate up the food chain. There's a real concern that we're contaminating our own food supply.
So part of what we do is communicate globally and say to people, treat your plastic with this technology and you won't have that problem.
The magic of the technology is converting the plastic into something that microorganisms can recognise as a food source. We're talking about bacteria and fungi, so using the products of polymer degradation, so they're no longer a polymer, they're low molecular weight, they're oxidised. So these microorganisms recognise these as the organic molecules that they would normally use as either a source of fuel for respiration or a source of carbon for growth and repair.
So here we are. This is the world of oxo-biodegradable plastic. It's been available in all these countries for about 10 years. It's being used in these countries for shopping bags, for food wrappers, for chocolate bar wrappers, for all sorts of everyday items. In all of these countries, they've got the same problem as we all have got, plastic litter getting into their environment, and they do not want it lying around for 50 years. So they're using oxo-biodegradable plastic. All these countries are, but not so much in the United States, the UK and Europe, because it's the countries in the Middle East here who've understood the importance of oxo technology, and they've actually legislated to make it compulsory for everyday items.
Here was a good example of a product that we actually created. It can be recycled, and if it needs to be reused and reused and reused, it can. But if it ends up in the environment, in our oceans in particular, or in our open environment where animals will consume it and drains are blocked, we know that this is going to unzip, it's going to degrade, it's going to eventually biodegrade, and the carbon value, the carbon that went into this, that's going to be shared back into the ecosystem. It's going to return to nature.
Not long ago, a whale was washed up on a beach in England, and its stomach was found to be full of plastic bags. Now, if oxo-biodegradable technology had been used for those bags, most of them would have degraded long before the whale had a chance to eat them. I don't think finance has got anything to do with this, because it's really doesn't cost very much extra, hardly anything extra, to use oxo technology. So it's just a question of whether the government is sufficiently interested in protecting the environment. Now, they all say they are. They're all going on almost every day about how environmentally friendly they are and how their policies are. Oh, we're going to recycle this, we're going to incinerate that, we're going to stop landfill. They talk a lot about it, but they don't do anything practical to solve the problem of that proportion of the plastic waste which gets out into the open environment all around the world, into the sea and onto the land. They're not doing what they ought to be doing, and that is using a new technology which is available to make sure that that plastic waste will not be there in a few months' time, let alone 50 years.
So for the first time ever, we have a technology that updates, that improves, that makes this piece of plastic smarter, thus removing the main objection of using it. So people don't need to make a change, they just need to upgrade the plastic.
The genius of this product is that we are not changing the item itself. It is still plastic polymer. But what we're doing is we're adding something that will create an insurance policy that if it does end up in the environment, then it'll actually go back to being just carbon and water and the things that we know exist in the environment.
So, Michael, just explain to us in depth why that video is, or the video that sort of demonstrates or argues that you don't have the solution to the biodegradable problem. Just explain why that's wrong.
Our two videos, of course, are completely different videos. The poor media, which was a coverage by the BBC about a week ago, is fundamentally wrong because it only gave part of the story and it was very selected in what they said. But a really good example of where it is wrong, they show a picture of a professor in the Plymouth University selecting a plastic bag that was supposed to have our technology in, but nobody checked to see whether it was really in there in the first place, but let's assuming it was. He then drops it 6 feet into cold, dark water, and after 2 years expects it to degrade and biodegrade. Well, that's not a realistic test. That's not in the natural environment, and that's exactly what you would expect to get if the product was in storage. Those bags are programmed to have a storage life. We call it the dwell time. Nobody wants their plastic to degrade and biodegrade while it's in the store. It's only when you expose it externally will the oxidation process start. But I have to say, it will still degrade and biodegrade in the oceans, even if you put some lead weight in it, which they did, because plastic generally floats. It will float on the surface and slightly below the surface. It gets the reflection of the sunlight, it gets the heat, it gets the ripples of the wave, it gets all of that, which accelerates the degradation process. What you're seeing in the Plymouth University example, if you can call it an example, it's pretty basic. You take a piece of plastic, you submerge it in the dark, not an awful lot of oxygen, And
presumably not an awful lot of microbial life either if it's in the dark.
there's
and it's
nothing
cold.
there. It's simulating storage conditions that you would find in the back of a warehouse somewhere, and it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, not to self-destruct before it's supposed to self-destruct. Now, if they'd said to us we want a product that would degrade and biodegrade quickly in the oceans, we create a formulation to do that. But in this case, a Wilkinson shopping bag, I think it was, the last thing Wilkinson wants is their bags to go in less than 2 years, because they keep stock rolling from the production facility in China, just transiting into the UK, the storage and distribution into their different units. And they want the bag, and they want their customers to reuse those bags if they can. That's the message. Nobody uses a single life carrier bag once. They call it single life, but the average statistic is 5 times. And the end of life on the carrier bag is you use it as a bin liner. The only time you want it to degrade and biodegrade if it ends up in the environment, and you want that to go fast, and that's exactly what we designed that formulation to do. So instead of looking at the facts, what's that carrier's bag supposed to do? We would have said a minimum of 2 years storage life. That's what we would have said, but nobody asked us that question. They then say, oh, it doesn't work in compost. Our bags are not designed to work in compost. Our bags are designed to work in the open environment if it escapes the collection. The insurance
Is compost
policy.
not quite a good environment? Lots of microbes there.
Yeah,
Probably a fair amount of oxidation as well. So
yeah, wonderful, and it will work in the environment, in the compost. But what it would not do is meet the European norm that requires you to push out 90% of the CO2 in 180 days. In other words, the normalization that the crop-based people rely on is to get 90% of the CO2 out. In other words, push it into a greenhouse gas in 180 days. We can't do that. Our CO2 evolution rates are too low. So we don't market it for compost.
So you mean you produce less CO2 over a longer period of time?
We create an awful lot less, because a lot of our activity from our microbes go into cell wall structure, it goes into energy, and it goes into biomass. So we don't create the same amount of CO2, and ours is gradually bioassimilated.
So does that mean the microbes eat the plastic, and then that sustains their life? That sustains their life. That's what they live off. Therefore, it doesn't go into carbon dioxide, except insofar as the microbes might breathe out carbon dioxide.
They don't live on the plastic, they live on the biodegradable material. The first phase is oxidation in our case. On the crop-based material I'm talking about is made from food crop. You're looking for damp, you're looking for hydrolysis. There's a hydrolysis situation where you're breaking up the molecular structure of the plastic. The issue we're dealing with in the world today is not all about recycling, because we can't pick it all up. Particularly in Africa, they don't have recycling facilities. Particularly in the UK, where we've been sending it all to China because we couldn't recycle it. Our issue, which is clearly on the government's agenda, is on the European government's agenda. Please stop plastic litter on land and in oceans. The compostable products don't do that. We do. And we claim that our product does not work in landfill because there's not enough oxygen. We claim it's not designed for composting. We make it very, very clear. Yet our detractors, or the negative PR, says, oh, it doesn't work in landfill. Well, we said it didn't work in landfill, so why are you telling people that? It doesn't work in compost. It's not designed for compost. Yes, it will work in compost, but it doesn't meet the norm. Not designed for that. Compostable and compost units do not want plastic in their compost. They are soil enhancers. So the less plastic they get, the better. Stop encouraging people to fill their plastic bags to put in compost. Bad idea.
So what would be the ideal application for your product?
It's on the European Union's hit list. The hit list for removing short-life plastics is not just shopping bags, it's cotton buds, drinking straws, and we're having tens of millions of drinking straws with our technology being made as we sit here in Latin America, in China. It's growing business for us because people don't want paper. The paper sticks to your lips. It's horrible. Expensive as well, not particularly environmentally friendly. Toothpicks, mulching film for growing crop, other crop growing materials, coffee pots, food packaging. Walk down the supermarket aisle. We want a plastic-free aisle is what a lot of people are saying. No, you don't. because that's going to make your food go off much faster. What you want is material and packaging that can be recycled, that can be reused, and that will totally biodegrade if it ends up in the environment. That's what the European strategy is saying, that's what the UK strategy is saying, and that's what we're trying to communicate, to say that this technology of ours, this D2W technology, ticks all those boxes, and there is nearly 4 decades of scientific, peer-reviewed, published papers to prove it. Shouldn't be difficult.
So I think we've got a video, haven't we, here, where we can demonstrate exactly, in your terms, what you think the correct application of your technology is. So let's have a look at that now.
We're on the edge of something new, trying to make a world for me and you, something that can last forevermore, something that is real, set in stone. It's the path of life we got to choose. In the end, it's us who's gonna lose. We were never better off alone. So stand together, citizens of home. When silent voices call you, listen. Here's a reason for a mission. We should be the symphony for change. Symphony for lose yourself to intuition. All you need is your permission. We should be the symphony for change. Symphony for. Symphony for. Symphony for. Change. Symphony for. Change. Symphony for. If you take a moment just to think, life is all but over in a blink. There's no need to find a second home. This is where we all were meant to roam. When silent voices call you, listen. Here's a reason for a mission. We should be the symphony for change. Symphony for lose yourself to intuition. All you need is your permission. We should be the symphony for change. Symphony for. Symphony for. Symphony for. Change. Symphony for. Change. Symphony for. So hold on. Keep holding on. So hold on to what we got. So hold on. Keep holding on. So hold on to what we got. Symphony for. Symphony for. Change. Symphony for. Change. Symphony for. Hold on. Keep holding on. So hold on to what we got. Symphony for. Hold on. Change. Symphony for. Hold on to what we got. Symphony for.
So, Michael, I think I'm right in saying, if you look at what the detractors are saying, one of the things they say, because your product is essentially a pellet, what looks like a plastic pellet, and then you add it to the conventional plastic polymer making process,
Yes.
and then the fact that it has your pellets in it allows it to oxybiodegrade. So what some of your detractors, I think I'm right in saying, are that it doesn't completely biodegrade. What you're making is microplastic. You're just making large bits of plastic into small bits of plastic. What would you say to that?
Well, I would say this. It's people that don't understand chemistry are saying that, because the oxidation process with our technologies is proven to be irreversible. This is described as a chemical step change, is irreversible. And when you end up with making a product, you end up with a product that is persistent in the environment. So we convert a piece of plastic from a material to a biodegradable material. And through that process, you go through embrittlement, you go through fragmentation, and you go conversion into biodegradable materials. That is demonstrated on the video, where you see the molecular weight of the plastic drop from a mass of a number, 200,000 Daltons, which is a measurement, to something like sub 5,000 Daltons, where it becomes water wettable, it becomes soluble, you're producing oligomers. We've already done the study showing that it's actually soluble. And from there, you've actually made those chains that you started to talk about that contain oxygen bonds to it, that much smaller that the microbes can see it as food. And depending on the sort of microbes you've got, whether they are marine microbes, and there's plenty of those, which Queen Mary University London managed to establish, or you're talking about microbes that you find in Saudi Arabia, or microbes that you find in London, depending on how much you've got, what the activity is, what other materials they are, will determine the speed of the final biodegradation, which is nearly irrelevant, because that process should be a gradual assimilation back into nature. You're returning the carbon value back into nature. That's what our technology's done. It's actually taken that plastic material that escapes recycling, and it's making it organically recycle at the end of its life if it escapes the collection system. It's putting value back into our ecosystem. That's what we're doing. Very valuable.
So tell me if I got this right. A polymer is a long chain carbon molecule.
Yes.
By adding your pellets to it, this allows it to oxidize, and in oxidizing it breaks down into shorter chain,
Yes.
still I suppose polymers, but they're short enough for microbes to see them as food, I suppose as something like sugar. And they will then feed on this product, and then it will become part of their metabolism, and they will do whatever they do with it. But then, so you don't create then, and when they excrete then, they're not excreting a small bit of plastic. It's actually gone into their metabolism, and that long chain polymer has totally broken down.
Completely broken down, because you've converted that polymer through the molecular weight drop to a non-polymer, to biodegradable materials, aldehydes, ketones, esters, all of those materials, which are natural materials, not polymers. They're soluble. And the microbes consume that, and they get, and this is the calculation, it's variable. You get CO2, a small amount, you get cell wall structure, you get energy, and you get a certain amount of biomass. How much you get of each will depend on the activity, the type of microbes, but it is organically recycling itself back. You're not losing that carbon value. And that's the beauty of the technology.
So my understanding is several of the Gulf states have legislated that plastic bags should be made from your product, but my understanding is that the European Union is under pressure to ban it. Is that right?
Well, the European Union was lobbied 2 to 3 years ago to try and ban a product called oxo-degradable, which is not our product as defined by the European normalization. Our product
what is oxo-degradable? Is that you leave it in the air and it breaks down?
means it's only going to go through oxidation. It's not going to go through biodegradation.
Right, okay. So I mean, oxidation you could do just by burning it.
Well, I wouldn't call that burning it.
But it's the same sort of process. You oxidize a polymer, you get...
Oxidation is one thing, and oxidation could cause these harmful fragments to stay around much longer. Our material is defined by the European norms. It's the European rules, their description, not our description, as a product that will go for oxidation and biodegradation. Cell-mediated activity is what they describe it as, and oxidation where the molecular weight drops. We tick that box. We tick the box of the norms. There are norms. There's an international norm, there's a British standard, there's other standards that confirm it. And we actually tick the box that the European Parliament was given by their own consultants that said our technology is biodegradable. The only way they can put a restriction on our technology, which is what they've managed to do or cause doubt, is say, you're oxo-degradable. And so they tried to ban it, they lost. The condition was that there would be a report done on this technology, which we think is great, amazing. The first time that somebody's got to look at our technology and look at the science. And the European Commission transferred the file to ECHA, which is the European Chemical Agency. And the European Chemical Agency that we've been cooperating with take the view that they need to look at the technology, they need to look at the claims, our claims and our detractor claims, and decide, should there be any restrictions? Now, in our opinion, there should be restrictions because we don't want technology in the market that's going to cause fragments. So we will say all technology, like they do in Saudi Arabia or like they do in Congo or like they do in the Ivory Coast and in other parts of the world, they all have a standard. There must be a standard. Standard measures degradation and it measures biodegradation, and more importantly, it measures ecotoxicity. Whatever you produce should never ever be toxic. So the restriction should be any product coming onto the European market should be controlled by a standard. We support that, we welcome it, and we've cooperated with a lot of governments to create standards around the world. And I think that's the direction we're going in. I think if they don't use this technology in Europe, it's impossible to ban plastics. Impossible. What are you going to wrap your food in? What are we going to do in the medical world, which plastics is used everywhere, from non-woven materials for surgeons' gowns to hats to toothbrushes to toothpicks to drinking straws. It's not going to change anytime soon. So this is a natural, obvious technology to use. It's a drop-in technology, doesn't interrupt the dynamic properties of the product. The clarity doesn't change, the color doesn't change, the strength doesn't change. The cost is negligible, anything between nothing to 5%, depending on what the manufacturer really wants to charge for it. Easy to do. So to us, this is great news that ECHA's looking at it. And we're hoping that once ECHA comes out with their report, they will look at the evidence, and they've got the evidence, hundreds of pages, lots of communications from all around the world, because they asked the people in UAE, they asked the people in Africa, they asked the people in Saudi Arabia, what do you think of the technology? And the answers they're getting are not negative. So we're happy to see, if you like, we're in the last year of a debate for Europe in relation to should we fully support this technology and encourage people to use it. The answer is obviously yes. Great Britain should be using it anyway because we export just about all our products overseas. We should use it.
So when does ECHA come out? Do you know the timing on this report? This is pretty key for you.
Yes, it's very key to us because that effectively will be released, I think it's on the 30th of January 2019. That only gives you the report. What it doesn't do is define the course of action. It might give us an indication of their findings. It will give us an indication of their findings. Their findings have got to be proportionate. Their findings have got to consider the economic effect, any unforeseen consequences. That will give us strong indication.
That sounds like, how disruptive are you being to the conventional plastics industry?
No, what it really means is if they don't promote this sort of technology, what's going to happen as a result of it? And the answer to that is we are going to put more pressure on plastic. We're going to drive people away from plastics. We're going to push them into more bio-based products, which our competitors would love. And that's something that's already going on in Italy. Paper, there'll be more paper products, so we're going to chop more trees down. We're going to have more CO2 as a result of putting more energy into making it. So those are the unforeseen consequences. So if this technology's got merit, which our evidence says it's got merit, and 11 governments says it's got merit, then...
Is that 11 out of 27?
Well, we have 11 so far, and a lot more.
Or is that globally? 11?
Globally.
Globally, right.
Globally, all outside of Europe.
Right.
And so if you look at where that is, you look at what ECHA's got to do. ECHA cannot cause further disruption. It's got to look at consequences caused by their action. So what will the consequences be if you don't support this technology? How many jobs are you going to put out? What income is going to be lost in Europe? For example, by law, a lot of European manufacturers have now got to make oxo-biodegradable plastics for Saudi Arabia or for the UAE or for other countries that are legislating. Those countries are going to put restrictions up saying you're not allowed to ship anything unless it's got this technology. The Europeans are going to say, what do we do? We're going to have to close our factory. We can't make it. We're not allowed to make it. REACH will not allow this product to be used in Europe. That's never going to happen. Never.
So, 31st of June next year, you get their report.
30th of January.
30th of January next year.
Correct.
Okay, let's just be clear on 30th of
Well, the world
January.
gets the report. It goes on the website.
Okay, but that will say we like this, or we don't. That will come up with a conclusion as to how they feel about your technology, and then there is a subsequent report about, what did you describe, an action directive?
Well,
What they should do about their findings. Is there a timeline on that?
Yes, that's many, many months, because they've got to go to various committees to debate their findings and decide if they want to recommend to the European Parliament, the European Commission. The Commission goes to first, the Commission then goes to the Parliament. This is what I think you should do, and generally they would back what ECHA's saying. So if ECHA comes out as we think they will come out, I think we'll get our clarity by the end of January. Should ECHA not come out with a clear decision, our export markets still continue to grow. We do not export into Europe. It's not a market that we're currently in. It's a market that we would like to get in. So if we can win that, our sales go up by a bigger number than they're currently moving up. So to us, we're in a win-win, but could we be in a double win if we get the right approval from ECHA? That's what we're looking at.
Okay, I ask almost everybody this, not absolutely everybody, but almost everybody, but how are you potentially affected by Brexit?
Well, good and bad. We love a very, very weak currency. Love it.
Said like a true manufacturer.
We're in dollars and we're exporting, so it's very, very important to have that weak dollar. Regulations.
Weak sterling or weak dollar?
Weak sterling, get it right.
Right.
Thank you very much. And so far as regulations are concerned, European regulations are a real pain for us. We think sadly it won't be the case, even with a Brexit deal, our regulatory system will still be linked into Europe. It won't make any difference. But if we could separate UK regulations to European, we create our own laws, we enforce our own laws, our other technologies, our flame retardants, our insecticidals, our antimicrobials will move much, much faster. It's not a matter of how we develop the right technologies and do they work. Yes, they do. We're fighting regulatory clearances in various different countries, and that's all we're doing in a lot of our projects. Quite exciting. We are moving, but restrained by regulations, particularly in Europe. Love a clean Brexit, but we're not going to get it.
All right. Michael, I'm afraid that's all we got time for, but thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Michael Laurier, the Chief Executive of Symphony Environmental, and I would encourage you all to go and have a look at it and then come to your conclusions as you will in the light of what Michael has said. It's a complicated issue, but Michael, thank you very much indeed. I think it was very well explained in that short interview. As I say, that's all we got time for today. We'll be back next week, and until then, this is me, Charlie Gibson, signing off for Core Finance and our Chief Executive interview. And until next week, you have a very capital day.